broadcasting in digital in the Atlanta area.
Coming up on Lawmakers, the Senate passes a controversial indigent defense bill to remove senior judges from death penalty trials. Legislation requiring permits for installation of traffic light cameras gains approval. And the 2008 amended budget heads to the governor. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, and Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening. Also on Lawmakers, the Senate votes to create the city of Dunwoody. The House approves a measure that could make driving without a license a felony, but changes send that bill back to the Senate.
And it's the end of another legislative week, so we'll talk with Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitolImpact.com. But first, our top story tonight, a bill removing judges from capital punishment cases clears the Senate. Legislation to overhaul the state's indigent defense system passed the Senate today, and Lawmakers Bridget Snapp joins us live with that story. Bridget.
David, HB 1245 responds to the controversial defense spending in the case of accused Fulton County courthouse shooter Brian Nichols. That case has cost the state nearly $2 million. The bill mandates that only elected judges oversee death penalty cases and sets up a cost-sharing system between the state and counties for indigent defense. The bill's sponsor, Senator John Wiles, explains.
We have an elected judiciary in the Georgia, and a judge which has to face voters every 4 years is more responsive to the other concerns of those that are paying the bills, i.e. the county commission and those of us that are finding the monies in the budget, so that's an important thing. And we've increased a fee on bonds from $50 to $100, and those monies will be $50 of that $100 bond fee will be paid to the counties because we're now requiring counties to verify indigency. We had 4 county commissioners from different geographic regions to the council. That was a big push from the county commissioners.
The measure also defines an indigent as someone at the poverty level instead of the current 125% of federal poverty. Senator Wiles added a measure in committee last week to the bill, calling for indigent defendants to have access to a lawyer within 5 days rather than the current 72-hour requirement. He says this will help reduce costs.
One of the concerns we have is indigent defense is very costly, and we're trying to provide a cost-effective solution. Importantly, if you had a court appearance where a lawyer was required under the Constitution, you would still get a lawyer inside that 72 hours or 5 days.
Senator Seth Hart proposed an amendment to keep the current 72-hour requirement.
Why mess with something, and why give the defense bar an opportunity to poke a hole in something where there is not a problem? And as far as the recovery of cost, that won't make a hill of beans difference. It simply means that the person who is accused of this crime is afforded an attorney at an early time. And that, folks, if you don't do that, when you've given a right to somebody, you raise a specter that will be taken all the way up to the United States Supreme Court.
However, that amendment failed by a vote of 16 to 18. HB 1245 passed by a vote of 38 to 11 and now goes back to the House for its approval of the changes. Reporting live, I'm Bridget Snapp for Lawmakers.
Okay, thank you very much, Bridget. Well, Dunwoody is yet another step closer today to becoming a city. Senate Bill 82 passed the House yesterday, and the Senate agreed with the House changes today, but not without debate from DeKalb Senator Ronald Ramsey. Bill sponsor, Senator Dan Weber, presents SB 82.
Everybody's on the same page with the changes that have been made. It passed through the House yesterday by a vote of 106 to 60. So I would ask you to join me in agreeing to the House substitute to Senate Bill 82.
This bill has been the subject of debate for 3 years or more. And this morning we received a 60-page amendment from the House. And it would be more appropriate at the appropriate time, Mr. President, to table this bill to give this body, especially give the courtesy of members from DeKalb County the opportunity to review the amended provisions.
The Senate passed Senate Bill 82, 36 to 13. Despite Senator Ramsey's opposition, there were no floor amendments, so it now goes to Governor Perdue.
A bill requiring that traffic monitoring devices fall under state regulation finally passes the Senate today. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish joins us live with more. Sandra.
In Dunwoody, the bill, which was tabled last week due to confusion over a number of amendments, was taken off the table today. But again, some senators tried unsuccessfully to amend it with trauma care funding. House Bill 77 would require local governments to get a permit from the DOT to install the cameras after an engineering study is first done to show they're needed.
Right now, they are not regulated at all, and this would require them to get a permit and go through an extensive process to see if it is actually for safety and not for revenue. The bill specifically says that it's for health and human safety and not for the revenue portion.
But again, Senator John Douglas opposed any changes.
There's two things we're guilty of here. Number one, we just can't stand it unless we're telling the cities and counties what to do. You know, we got lots of business at the state level, but we love to tell the cities and counties what to do. And the second thing that we do well here is we try to fix things that are not broken.
Senator Bill Jackson doesn't want them at all.
These machines, love them or not, one of them took in $1,700,000 of the people's money. We're in hard times. We're in times when jobs are not real opportune anymore. We're in times that people are suffering because they have no work. And we would trick him with a thing hanging over the street corners like a buzzard spitting out and spewing his regurgitation down on the good people that sends us here. What's wrong with us?
The measure was amended to require notice by registered mail on the second offense, and that those living out of state can sign and mail in an affidavit that they weren't driving the vehicle. An amendment to require half of the revenues collected to go to trauma funding failed.
This says health and safety. To me, I don't know a whole lot, but I'm a nurse. Health and safety is the same as trauma, because that is what trauma takes care of. People who are in major accidents go to trauma hospitals. How is that not relevant to what we're trying to do? I just can't comprehend that.
Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson says he's working on amending another bill with trauma care funding.
It would be a revenue bill. It's not a constitutional amendment, but it would be subject to voter approval. We'll add on a $10 tag fee that will then fund a trauma system and expand the one we have.
The cities that currently have the cameras would have until 2010 to have them permitted. House Bill 77 now goes back to the House to approve today's changes. Reporting live, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Thank you, Sandra.
The House and Senate approved the Conference Committee report on the FY08 amended budget today. Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Hill goes through a couple of the compromise's key sticking points.
Equalization was an issue that a number of you had an interest in. It was a big issue with the House as well. I won't re-plow that ground, but just to tell you that there is $20 million in the amended budget towards the new formula for equalization. I would suggest that we need a study committee to look at school funding over the interim and look at things like equalization. That's a formula that seems to have strayed from its original purpose. Public defenders, we have settled on a figure of $2.7 million additional dollars. This is down from the original request to the governor of $4 million. We think that is adequate, maybe more than adequate, to complete the year.
Again, the FY08 amended budget compromise passed both chambers, so it now heads to Governor Perdue.
And the House voted to immediately transmit the supplemental budget to the governor and then move to pass the 2009 spending plan. With the reduction in projected revenue, Appropriations Chair Ben Harbin said austerity cuts and reductions were inevitable. Even the governor's VIP program to increase parental involvement in schools was not immune.
We're not saying we don't like it. We are zeroing it out. But what we're saying is now is probably not the time. We have things in education that are working, things we have to do in education, and that's where we should focus first.
Still, Harbin says he's most proud of the education budget.
And when you approve this document today, you will have fully funded, I hope the Senate goes along with it, fully funded our equalization funding. to meet the law. You know, discussion about changing that funding formula. Well, maybe it needs to be changed, but as long as you have those funding formulas, you should fully fund them, because you cannot say that we're funding education if we don't fully fund them. The governor's budget had a $141 million reduction to QBE funding formula. In this document, there's $90 million put back into QBE. We hope that the Senate, working with us, will find that other $50 million. I think they will. Because I hope that they have that. I feel they have the same commitment to fully funding education that we do. And if you will vote for this document, it'll be the first step to taking it back to fully funding QBE.
House Democrats are calling on the state to spend a portion of the $1.6 billion reserves on public schools.
I want to commend Chairman Harman, because what he said is exactly what he needs to say. If we're going to fully fund education, let's do it. Let's figure out a way to do it. Hopefully through this process, as it leaves here, that's what we can get done. But by the result of that, lowering that revenue estimate, it has caused two things to happen that need to be mindful. One, we were not able to complete fully funding those austerity cuts, and by having to move maintenance projects into bonds, it's put us deeper in debt.
The general appropriations bill for 2009 passed 166-1 and was immediately transmitted to the Senate. 4 strikes and unlicensed drivers could wind up behind bars with the passage today of Senate Bill 350 by the House. Debate centered around whether sentencing those who drive without a license to felonies is too severe.
2 to 12 days for a first-time offense for driving without a license is disproportionate to the offense at issue. I also have concerns that the 4th offense would be raised to the level of a felony, whereas a 4th speeding offense is not a felony offense.
We're going to lock somebody up again, and it's going to cost the county more and more money just to keep folks locked up. I would like to see them confiscate the automobile. You don't have to feed the automobile. You don't have to clothe the automobile. You don't have to make sure it's in a hospital. Just take the automobile away from the folks. If they can't drive with a license, just lock it up. It doesn't take a whole lot to do that. I don't understand why we keep locking folks up. It's going to cost the counties more and more money, more to the cities. I don't understand why we're doing this.
Senate Bill 350 passed the House by a vote of 99 to 68. Changes to the bill send it back to the Senate.
Well, it was another week full of budget debate and tax reform. I talked with Tom Crawford of CapitalImpact.com earlier today about this week's action, beginning with the 08 amended budget.
The 08 amended budget, where they're basically making adjustments to the current spending plan, they had been hung up primarily on the issue of equalization grants to local school systems, which are intended to help out some of the less wealthy, less affluent school systems. Governor Perdue tried to cut that by $30 million. The House and Senate both agreed it should be put back in, and they finally decided how they would do it. Put in some of the money in the mid-year budget and put in the rest of it next year so that the schools can get the full amount of money they're entitled to.
Well, there's an issue that could affect the budget in future years, that is tax reform. We knew it was going to be a year of tax reform, but it looks like we don't know exactly what's going to end up happening.
No, we don't, and we have the equivalent of a three-legged stool here, David, where the House has its own idea to eliminate the auto tag tax. The Senate has its idea to cut state income tax rates by about 10% over a 5-year period. And Governor Sonny Perdue thinks essentially they're both crazy, that when we're heading into a recession and with so much budget uncertainty, if you cut revenues as you would if you enacted one of these tax breaks, it would make it very, very difficult to balance the budget and provide the sort of services that Georgia taxpayers expect.
Let's talk about a bill that went through yesterday, and that deals with changes in the death penalty sentencing here in Georgia.
Barry Fleming, the House Majority Whip, tried last year to amend the law so that you could give someone the death penalty even if there was a less than unanimous vote by the jury. In other words, if the jury voted 11 to 1 or 10 to 2, they could impose the death penalty. He was able to put that as an amendment to another bill. It came up before the House yesterday, and the House adopted it. Now, whether the Senate will agree with this or not is an open question, and they may well decide to defeat the bill. But it's an interesting concept that's out there right now for debate.
Well, let's talk about a member of the Capitol Press Corps. I guess he could be looked at as the dean of the Capitol Press Corps. That is a friend of yours, Dick Pettis, had his moment in the Senate today.
Yes, he did. Dick has been covering things up here for 37 years now, first for the Associated Press and then for another news service. He plans to retire later this year, as I understand it, so they passed a resolution in the Senate today commending him for his years of service, and there's no question there's never been a better reporter up here than Dick Pettis. He got up before the Senate, I think, for the first time in his journalistic career and actually said a few words to them instead of vice versa, and everybody applauded, and it was a real feel-good moment.
Well, we've all learned a lot from Dick Pettis through the years. Tom Crawford, CapitolImpact.com. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Good to be here.
And soon after Tom and I discussed the House's death penalty actions from yesterday, the bill was amended in the Senate to remove those House changes. SB 145 sponsor Senator Preston Smith explains why he disapproves of those House changes.
This is a disaster in criminal jurisprudence. If you want to eliminate any possibility of any death penalty trial being upheld on appeal, vote for the House version. They have effectively ended the death penalty in Georgia by putting together this type of contradictory bill. What I have done with my recommendation, on the firm belief that these are very two distinct and independent issues which should be carefully and deliberately considered, that each one should go through the committee process, that members should have the opportunity to express their views, to make amendments, and to place on the floor and vote on that which they believe is the best policy for Georgia. And this is a serious policy. They have nevertheless declined that opportunity and instead wanted to hijack the bill in a way that will eliminate the death penalty in Georgia through its very confusion. The amendment that I have that I will ask you to support today will restore Senate Bill 145 to the Senate position, a position that was widely supported in the Senate and in the House, a position which they are very much in favor of allowing life without parole to be a sentencing option for the crime of murder, just like it is for the crime of rape.
The Senate voted in favor of Smith's amendment, so SB 145 now goes back to the House.
The Senate passed a bill today that allows defensive driving classes to be taken online. Senator John Bullock, who carries HB 1027, argues that the online courses are just as challenging as the in-class courses.
It just makes it a little more convenient to the citizens of the state of Georgia to do it within their own home instead of having to go, or they could do it in a public library, instead of having to go somewhere to a school, and they can take it any time. The others, they are restricted to certain times that those courses are offered.
In your mind, is it more important that we make it easier on them, or is it more important that we get a message across to them that there's a penalty to pay for getting into this position?
I don't think that there's any lessening of the requirements for a driver course. I think the message would be that we're trying to adapt and find ways to be able to deliver those in a better way to the citizens. And at the same time, requiring them, and I think with this type course and with this bill, the checks and balances, a more secure way for them to take this required course.
An amendment from Senator Joseph Carter lists certain traffic offenses where online courses would not be acceptable. House Bill 1027 passed 36-12 with the Carter amendment and now goes back to the House.
Police chases could soon be allowed to continue across state lines. The details of HB 983 are presented by Senator John Douglas.
What this bill would do is it would provide for reciprocal agreements between Georgia and bordering states to allow for police pursuits to continue across the border into Georgia from all of our neighboring states, so long as the neighboring states allowed us the same privilege of following pursuits into their states. However, it does not allow for, without the proper extradition proceedings, it does not allow for somebody who is stopped and actually apprehended in Georgia by out-of-state law enforcement to take that person out of Georgia without proper extradition.
House Bill 983 passed 46-0 and now goes to Governor Perdue.
Well, a short legislative week did not stop the General Assembly from making some big moves on the budget, in law enforcement, and with new tax-cutting proposals. The week began with the area around the Capitol beginning to dig out of the aftermath of a tornado and facing an estimated $250 million in damage.
We are hopeful that the Federal Emergency Management Agency is going to comply with the governor's request and declare a disaster area for parts of downtown that were hit.
A Senate plan to cut state income taxes by 10% was announced.
It's a proven record that the economy will recover faster and grow further with an income tax cut than any other kind of tax cut.
And Representative Ron Saylor gave up his House seat after pleading guilty to agreeing to launder hundreds of thousands of dollars for an undercover agent.
With good legal advice. He didn't have to go this way.
On Wednesday, the Senate Finance Committee gutted House Speaker Glenn Richardson's plan to repeal the ad valorem tax on cars and replaced it with a 10% income tax reduction proposal.
They didn't ask me, they didn't tell me, they had a substitute drawn, and by the way, it wasn't anything that resembled the bill that this body passed.
It's a little bit like playing spades. You know, if I play the 3 of spades, you got to play something higher. And that's the sad thing is that the physical health, the financial health of Georgia going forward is what's being played with.
The House tags House Bill 185 onto a Senate measure, adding to the life without parole sentence for murder a provision allowing a judge to issue a death penalty verdict in cases when a jury can't decide.
If 1 or 2 jurors, after deciding that this person has committed the murder, decide for whatever reason that they can't support the death penalty, like they said they would consider when they were slated to put on the jury, then if it's a 10-2 or 11-1 vote, it simply gives the judge an option then to weigh in and decide if he will apply the death penalty.
Lawmakers learned that the Ron Saylor criminal investigation may include other elected officials, both as informants and suspects.
I absolutely hope that no one else in public life in elected office is involved, but if they are, and if they have been complicit and cooperative in this effort, and if they've been participating in illegal activities, I hope they root out every last one of them.
And U.S. Senator Saxby Chambliss comes to the Capitol to announce that he will seek another term. And that's this week under the Gold Dome.
Some Georgia voters may find that electronic voting is a quick and easy thing to do, but one Georgia group says that there is a problem with Georgia's e-voting system. Lawmakers' Dana Abercrombie has more.
In November, millions of Georgians will be headed to the polls to cast their vote. But members of voters organized for trusted election results in Georgia say that Georgia's e-voting system is illegal and unconstitutional because of the controversial machines being used.
The voting cannot be verified, audited, or recounted. And what we mean by that is I, as a voter, cannot verify that my selections that I made are actually on the record that is being counted by the Secretary of State's office. And in fact, we've even found out that the tabulation results could possibly be manipulated fraudulently without detection.
We're confident in the machines. They've been used effectively now for several years in multiple elections. There hasn't been the slightest allegation that any of the results that have been produced through those machines, the votes that have been cast with those machines, have been in jeopardy, that they've been victimized or manipulated in any way. We're very confident in using those machines as we go forward in the July elections as well as in November.
In 2006, Voter Georgia filed a lawsuit against the Secretary of State and this week filed a motion for summary judgment that seeks to ban Georgia's current voting equipment. The Secretary of State's office is expected to make a counter motion in the next few days. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Dana Abercrombie.
The House Motor Vehicles Committee unanimously passed 2 pieces of legislation today. SB 181 addresses fees imposed by rental car companies. The bill requires rental car companies to adjust average per vehicle fees if the total charged at the end of the year exceeds the actual recoverable fees. SB 517 allows businesses that issue company cars to disabled employees to receive disabled tags for the vehicles. The bill also makes it a misdemeanor for non-disabled persons to falsely benefit from the privileges of a disabled tag, for instance, parking in handicapped spaces. Again, SB 181 and SB 517 both passed unanimously out of House Motor Vehicles and now move to House Rules.
Today, the Sierra Club made a call for clean energy by protesting a Texas corporation's plans to build a coal-fired power plant in rural Georgia. Lawmakers' Andy Dixon has a story.
Dynergy Incorporated, a Houston-based company, is making preparations for a coal-driven power plant to be located in Early County. The Sierra Club, an environmental advocacy group, hosted the rally challenging Governor Sonny Perdue to prevent construction of new plants and to encourage growth in the clean energy sector. We contacted Dynergy, and a spokesperson said the company is pursuing alternative energy sources, but currently not in Georgia.
This is a group of committed, concerned people who want to explore alternatives to coal-powered energy. Coal is bad for the environment, and it uses an incredible amount of water. As everyone knows, we're in a drought situation in Georgia, so we need to be looking at conserving our resources, not expending more of them at this time.
So, Sonny, if you're listening, this isn't just a bunch of environmentalists. These are your constituents, and we're calling on you to step up to the plate.
Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Andy Dixon.
Those involved in the search for Meredith Emerson, the young lady found murdered earlier this year in Dawson County, were honored in the Senate today for their efforts in the search. Dawson County Senator Chip Pearson presents the resolution.
She was kidnapped in Union County, up near Vogel State Park in the 51st District, and after being driven around by Mr. Hinton for several days, was ultimately found, unfortunately, deceased in the Dawson Forest Management area in Dawson County, about 6 miles from where I live, unfortunately, also in the 51st District this day. We have with us today, though, some folks that have gone, as I said before, above and beyond to help the family, to help justice be served, and to do their duty to a degree that is often not seen, especially at this time in very difficult circumstances.
As you may have heard Tom Crawford and I discuss earlier in our program, journalist Dick Pettis was honored with a resolution in the Senate today. He spoke briefly about his 30-plus years covering Georgia politics.
The first time I set foot in here was 1971, and after Frank Eldridge's death, some of his friends got a big picture of the 1971 Senate, and it's remarkable to look at that and just see how things have changed over the years. You're a great body. There are even some people here who've been here, well, maybe not quite that long, but they've been here a good long time. I count them as good friends as well as good sources. I did hear a little bit about this resolution. I tried to get some answers. Nobody would really tell me, but I'm very honored. I appreciate it. I asked Casey if I could call up the Supplemental Budget Conference Committee so we could get on with things, but he wouldn't let me. But anyway, I'll let you get on with business now. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm very honored, and I'll miss you guys. Still here until you adjourn.
All right. Good job.
Well, lawmakers will not be seen tomorrow or early next week because the Georgia General Assembly will be in recess. Lawmakers returns Thursday, March 27th at 7 p.m. with all the latest Capitol news. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and evenings at 6 p.m. on Georgia Gazette. Now stay tuned for the latest high school sports news with Prep Sports Plus. That program is coming up next here on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 34th legislative day of 2008. I'm David Zelski.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. We'll see you next Thursday.
Production of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Tonight.